All right, welcome. The extended gamut.
Here we are with special guest Sal Passanisi.
Yes.
Okay.
Sal Pantoni, Passanisi. We're going to learn a lot on this episode.
We are. We're going to learn about Sal's history, his arc through the industry, his detour into solar panels, his triumphant return to the industry.
Possible name changes that he's had and why people call him the color doctor.
And then we're going to get into some specifics about color management, color process control, why that matters, how you can do that with your own business. Hopefully some thoughts and some beginning conversations towards getting your color in a better place.
And if it goes well, who knows? He could be a recurring guest on the podcast. Stay tuned for this episode.
All right, here we go. So we're going to jump right to it. You notice we have a third person on the podcast today, Sal Passanisi. He needs no introduction.
The industry knows me as Pantoni.
Sal Pantoni.
Why do they know you as Pantoni? Let's start there.
That's a great question. Back in Cincinnati, the brand capital of the United States, I had a small printing company that I developed, and I specialized in prototype packaging. Sustainable, waterless offset, recycled stock, and one of my biggest clients was obviously P&G. A lot of toothpaste boxes through their converters, but I would match spot colors, and they couldn't pronounce my last name, so they kind of took the Pantone and me being Italian, and they started saying, basically, get that Pantoni guy in here and match these colors, and it stuck. So for decades now, I've been known as Pantoni. So dilemma with that is when there is also a Pantone problem, they kind of go to me because they think I'm Pantoni.
Oh. Have you ever thought about changing your name?
Recent events has made me thought about maybe becoming Focal Tony or some other kind of Tony. But no, it's stuck, and it's I guess it's pseudo branding. It was on my business cards when I actually worked at Pantone. That was part of the deal. I like it because it stimulates a conversation of what can be achieved in color, depending on the printers, and where and how to achieve it. And that's one thing you guys specialize in. I'm pretty impressed that you named the podcast as part of Color Gamut.
Yeah.
So that's important. Probably one of the only guys that would do that in our industry and not be buy more ink, buy more media podcast.
Right.
Well, no, that was in the running as yeah.
That was
It didn't
a close
test well.
second.
Yeah, it didn't test well.
The focus group didn't like it too much.
Yeah.
So tell us. So go through kind of your journey. So you're there, having your own print shop.
Yeah, my dad and my grandfather and my dad's brothers during World War II, they fished while the British and the Americans were bombing the harbor in Sicily. They would go out with baskets, and when the concussions from the fish would break their backs and they'd float up, they'd go out with the bombs flying around them. My dad and my grandfather's work ethic was everybody works, everybody eats, and it kind of hits home for me. My dad came over, grew up in Boston, really kind of cool town in Boston. There was a big publishing mecca there back in the late 70s, early 80s. Started with a company called CompuGraphic. They made photo typesetting systems and display ad systems, so I worked with them. I was their youngest field engineer. Got a Chicago link, got hired by R.H. Donnelly to develop a display ad manufacturing system for phone books.
Okay.
My first involvement with color was called Mark Color, where we took yellow and red ink, the yellow of the paper, and red ink and black ink, and tried to make 4-color in a phone book out of it for like real estate agents and insurance agents. So that's kind of how I started getting my feet wet with color. Did a system integration firm that I specialized in color on the desktop, so that's mid-80s. 90s, started to do printing, working, went to Cincinnati, built a system integration company, a lot of Cytex equipment, legacy type stuff. Developed a really good consulting firm up there, but got to the point where I had this mammoth demo room of equipment for pre-press and no way to print anything for customers. So at Print 95, Drupa, we went to Germany and I bought 2 printing presses and leveraged my entire life based on presses. So when I stand up when somebody says, are you a color expert? I say no, but I've had to make payroll and I've had to make press payments, and maybe miss a mortgage payment to do it. So until you've lived that and fed that, I don't think you're as respected by the customers as somebody that just says, I'm an expert, look at me. I mean, I've lived it and breathed it, so I feel what the customers are. From there, I sold that company and moved to Florida and started a solar business. I looked really brilliant for a couple of years there.
Solar.
Yeah, I'm internationally certified to do solar. So I went to school for 18 months when I sold the printing company and got solar certified. I looked brilliant because at that time, my printing company's 80% of the business was real estate postcards. So when the real estate market crashed, I looked brilliant for getting out of printing. But then the solar panel market crashed in like 2010. So I looked smart for about 3 or 4 years.
So now you're back to printing.
Yeah, about 2010, I had to get back into it just when I thought I was out of it. Pull me back in. No, but so I had to go back into it, and it's changed. So 2010 to 2020, a lot of changes, a lot of them driven by innovation companies like EPSON and HP. Got to spend some time at Label Expo and HP's booth. Really impressed. Same thing with EPSON yesterday, but that's we can talk about that later. But I decided I'm going to get back into this. I'm not going to focus on as much the proofing market. Started to get into digital textiles, and that went really well. And that's a revolution in itself from the soft signage market. And then got hired by a company called X-Rite Pantone. And I worked for about 3.5 years as a Pantone solution architect and business development manager, and left that about 2 years ago to kind of go back on my own and really kind of focus on what the customer needs are, but always sticking with color.
Yeah.
So I've kind of walked the walk. I'm old. I've walked the walk and talked the talk.
And there is a lot of people know you for your white lab coat.
Correct.
When did that start, and what was like the origination?
The Color Doctor started with the concept of color quality control. So process control is important. When I had my printing company, just to give you an idea, one of my presses would start up in 8 minutes and start running 3,000 sheets an hour. So if you didn't have the color right when it started up in 8 minutes, you could really blow some profitability out the window very quickly. So that's where we really had to start matching spot colors and doing process control. And when we call it color process control, I don't like using the term color management because it sounds like you have an overview person to do it. It's not. It's just part of the process. So DOC, it's called Digital Output Control. So it's developed by Barbieri, where you could take a target, and this is actually a Barbieri target that we can measure with any of these devices sitting here, but you measure a subset of patches, and it tells you whether for the ink, the substrate, and the printer, you're on target and your baseline's there before you run the job. Many IT supply customers would know the EPSON Spectrophotometer in proofing, where at the end of the job it measures and says, yes, the job is in tolerance, or no, it's not. This is more of a manual version of that. My concept was, because I know the printing and I had to do printing, I'm like, why did I run this bar at the end of the job after I printed it to find out it wasn't right? Let's run the bar first, novel concept, make sure that it's okay, right, then run the job. So we've been able to educate a lot of customers on doing that. We actually did even in the photo market, one of our fussiest customers that you guys have, we went in, he paid for the time. We actually photo fine art, so fractions of a delta E, not 3 to 6, but 0.2, 0.5. We're able to make process improvements at his shop, to where now he really believes in this and knows how to optimize and does this now,
right,
and he's
right.
going to buy a device and go, hey, I want to do this from now on because I don't want to ever give my customer a B+ job when I can give him an A+ job,
right.
And that's the key. But it's people, process, procurement, and time is money. This in the beginning saves time. So that's kind of what we focused on moving forward when I left Pantone, X-Rite, and we've been pretty successful at it when we've done it at shows.
Yeah.
So DOC, Digital Output Control.
That's
Doctor.
the doctor. All right.
And that's still kind of your focus is helping customers kind of lock down their processes so that they have quality output time after time.
You almost have had to with the supply chain issues and the pandemic. The quality of the substrates coming out has been all over the place. The containers of vinyl or containers of triple white fabric, all this stuff. So if you don't know run to run that your white point on your media is okay, your color is going to shift. Many of the products out there now that are printing have heat as part of the process. and if the heat changes, the color changes. So having that process control in place, especially for digital textile, wall covering, the resins, new applications, you really have to have a process in place. I just did a project for a customer where, multiple vendors, printers, and, if this job comes in, we only run it on, Wally. If this job comes in, we only run it on Harry. Number 1, number 3. And I'm like, no, you should be able to run it on all 3 of them, and they should be fine. But if you're not doing this, you don't know where the problem is. So we set up a process where they do it, 3 times a day, then morning, noon, night, and then measure it. And then we can see where the drift is, and we can start to troubleshoot. One thing that I would say is you don't want to go in there and just go in and say, I'm going to reprofile and redo your whole environment when you don't know the environment might be part of the cause of the color. So that you have to have those processes in place.
All right, so we got to know a little bit about where Sal came from, his experience, little known fact about why they call it the Doctor, DOC, Digital Output Control. So we're here at the Extended Gamut Podcast, which is typically we take questions from customers, either from itsupplies.com/questions or from our YouTube comments or things we hear at trade shows. But some of those questions are complex, maybe above our pay scale. Right, Andy?
Yeah.
So what are we doing today? So we have Sal on. What's the reason we have Sal on?
Yeah, I mean, some of these questions that we get, we know, like, generally, having process control is a good thing, or, you ought to do it, but we don't really know the mechanics of it. And so Sal really can help us with some of the questions that you guys have submitted. So one thing that this question was asked with regards to sublimation specifically, but I think it applies to everything. But what's the best way to ensure color quality across different manufacturers of equipment? So we have a lot of customers that'll run HP printers for one aspect, and then they're also doing mugs on an Epson die sub or whatever. And they may be marrying together several different pieces into an order with a logo or something like that. So how do you approach when you go to a customer? What's the best way to kind of match across those?
I'd say this, I always look at the least technological aspect before I start really going for the technological aspect, which you could say, well, I got to linearize and profile and do everything by type of substrate I'm using, but there's a post-process part of this. We had a customer who's no longer in business, but at the time they were, before they sold out, they had 40 drum heat transfer units. And their color was inconsistent. 10 Reggiani's running full bore, 24,000 orders a day coming out of this place. And he's like, this color's just totally inconsistent. I want you to come in here and with all your technology and do it. And I said, okay, well, I'm starting in the back where you're pressing the mugs and pressing the blankets and pressing the mouse pads. And I'm going to measure the heat coming off all these drums. And I took out a laser gun and started measuring the heat. And he's like, no one else has come in here and done that. Why are you wasting, you're too expensive to be doing that. But he had a 45 to 60 degree fluctuation between the drums running down. And there were a lot of drums. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, we have to stabilize this part of it first before we ever look at don't blame the $1 million piece of iron, blame the $30,000 piece, because that's what's going to drift. So I kind of start from the backside first. To give you an example, in the digital textile, I did a project for a very large textile printing manufacturer, and they thought I was out of my mind. I ran DOC targets, so like 6 by 8 inches across a 5-meter machine times 10 feet. And I said, I'll be here for the next 5 hours measuring these targets. But I had to see the consistency of the drum. And what was happening was they were running all their targets in the middle of the drum. That was drifting. Every time they go make a new environment, it was all over the place, and it had nothing to do with the machine. It was the drum. So I'm like, I'm going to solve your problem. I'll move the target to the right for now, and bingo, all of a sudden the color's all in. So you've got to be able to do that. But if it's multiple vendors of printing devices and multiple substrates, you've got to at least figure out if the environment's consistent first. Then we start printing these out. In the case of the the printer that we did, we saw a 7 delta E difference between 3 of the same vendors' printers with the same substrate. And Andy, that's the big question, because all of a sudden you start changing substrates, and that before you know it, it's called error stacking. So you start with a small color issue, and for those of you who don't know delta E, but with this extended gamut, we should. It's a grading system. A 1's an A, a 2's a B, a 3's a C. In commercial printing, we have a 6, which is kind of an F minus, but it's still in tolerance. But if you can get the customer in a 1 or a 2, an A or a B, and they drift, they're only at a C. But if they're already at a C and they drift 2 points, they're at an F. Right. So it's getting that shop's tolerance level to a B across the substrates, across the printing architectures, and then trying to keep it optimized. To make a crazily long answer short, it's always about finding the weakest link and making sure that it's not messing with the rest of the shop.
So sometimes that could be the gamut of the printer, right?
Correct.
If you want everything to be the same, you have to find the smallest gamut, and then they call it dumbing down, right?
Yeah, think of it as a piece of fruit. I mean, let's go in the orange family. We have navel oranges, we have small oranges, we have tangerines. If your shop's got a grapefruit size gamut over here and a tangerine size gamut over here, the tangerine is never going to be the grapefruit. Can I take the grapefruit and make it into the tangerine? Absolutely. The dilemma that most customers find when they get a solution in, and there are great value-added partners out there, IT Supplies being one of them, where they're going to analyze that before they're not going to promise you a watermelon, and sell you a grapefruit. They're going to say, hey, we can't take the tangerine, but we'll get you in the navel orange range, and then when you need the grapefruit, it's here, but it's not going to be on that printer because it can never be a grapefruit. So that's what a lot of customers, don't understand, and the orange is a good scenario because that's what color gamut looks like: white, black, and then color comes out. So it is a round kind of object that we need to be able to expand it to the edges and then try to match. And a lot of people don't realize that there's been a standard in the industry called swap, because it was easy for the commercial printers in the world to hit that standard, but in swap, about 50% of the Pantone colors don't get in there. So these guys could spend days trying to match a color that's out here in watermelon world. It's never in orange world. So, we've got to be able to educate that, and this color process control is a big part of it, because we did this job at Alpha Graphics. We had to measure all these colors and make sure they were right. And how we did that is before we started measuring these, we had to make sure the process was right before we start seeing if the spots are going to fall in. Mm-hmm. So, but we didn't waste 80 feet of media to do it. It's a 12-inch target.
So I feel like some customers are going to hear this and they're going to be like, yeah, no, I know I need to have better color. I want to have better color. It sounds really expensive. It sounds like maybe I need to hire Sal. Can people do this on their own? Is it so above people's heads, like the average operator, or can we? How difficult does it have to be?
We've been pretty successful, and you guys know at trade shows we get this question all the time, and what I like to say is the first thing is do you have a device in house? Do you have a spectrophotometer? And people say, no, I don't. And you ask them, hey, well, do you have a fiery rep? Oh, yeah, we definitely have a fiery rep. And you go find the little black suitcase that came with it. And then inside here is a magical device called an i1 Pro 2. If the cover's sticky, we can fix that. But it's a usable device. I can calibrate my monitor. I can measure my light in the room. And I can do this process control. Almost every digital front end out there, or if you don't have a digital front end, a X-Rite version of the i1 Pro 2 has a target that you can measure and give you a result. So if we can get them consistently able to measure across and down, we can give them a report that anybody can understand. We just did a project, and it sounds crazy simple, but the owner of the shop is semi-retired and he lives in Florida. His shop is in the Midwest. He wants to know, are my guys doing okay? So we put a little shared spreadsheet up. They scan 72 patches in. They plug in the main data, 5 columns. They put it on a shared spreadsheet on the cloud, and he sees, I'm trending. All my printers are trending good in the A-B category. I can now go out and go fishing. So it's not hard for them to do, and a lot of times they have the tools for it. The problem is some of us in this industry overcomplicate it because it's a revenue stream. Back to my dad, and the old teach a man to fish versus catch a fish. I am a charter captain and I do catch fish, but I would hate it if when they got off my boat, they didn't know that they could go to the end of the dock and use the techniques we showed them to catch another fish. And that's, I think, the thing that sets companies like IT Supplies apart. Me, because I've had to live it, I don't want a guy coming in and he's fixed it and I have no idea what he did to do it.
Right.
That's the problem that we have. But it is easy. It's simple.
So you mentioned devices in the i1 Pro 2. There's a new device that I wanted to let you talk about. This one here. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Okay. So full disclosure, I've had this device for a while. Anybody who's seen me at a show knows this is like my favorite device. This is called a Pantone Capture. It's got all the Pantone libraries in it. I can visually measure a color. It'll tell me what the values are.
That's what you put in your holster at the show?
That's what I put in my holster at the show. This is about a $700 device. I can do a similar thing tethered with the new i1 Pro 3 Plus for textiles, but I'm at about a $3,000.
So this one doesn't have a readout. You got to plug it in.
Yeah, there's no display, and there should be. I mean, and there could be, because if you really look, and not to force it or anything, this magically fits just like that on top, like it was made for it. Like if this sunk in, could become part of it. But that's not what happened. It came out as a slave device. But the industry will move how the customers want. So this SD-10 is not a colorimeter. It's a full spectrophotometer. And this thing's nickname is now called the Gorilla Killer. Because the Gorilla of Color sells devices for about $10,000 that this magical $800 device is now doing a really good job of doing. So I have the ability to measure lab. I have the ability to put it on my phone and have colors, so a display. I have my Pantone libraries in, and more importantly, it'll scan. So I can do process control with this device and measure my patches, where a lot of the smaller devices, inexpensive devices, the magical $1,200 price range now seems to be the thing. I can scan, I can measure spot, that's good. So this device and one of these devices, because I can measure light, monitors, and I can also do profiles, is a great combination, and we're at that $1,200 to $1,500 price range. That's the magical new point. The key with this device is this has internally been developed by EPSON. I firmly believe this thing's going to sit inside EPSON printers in the future and measure color in line like the Spectro Proofer, because the sensor's amazing, the lighting's amazing, it's got 7 LEDs, it's a large aperture, so really the same size aperture as we have here in the $3,000 device in an incredible package. And it links to the Epson Edge Rip. So from a customer's ROI standpoint, we now have a bundled, robust digital front end that also has a measuring device. I think the importance of devices like this that are from a manufacturer is that there's no finger pointing. When I do something in somebody else's software and I come back in, they go, maybe it's over there. I mean, this is Epson, Epson, Epson. So there's no finger pointing involved, but this thing has been really amazing, and the combination of having one of these in-house and one of these in-house, you've basically got the whole realm of what you need for color process control and color profiling.
Wow.
But this is new.
It's like an infomercial. It's like, I want one.
You want one?
Well, at the price point, and when talking to the guys at Epson, and we've all known the same guys for years, they listen. They listen when you tell them something. And this was going to be $1,500, 14, 12, 11. But what's out right now in a quality standpoint, that under $1,000 is a biggie, because it's really hard to sell a customer a $12,000 Spectro right now, because I just did a project for a customer, not you guys, but they got proposed a solution, and it was about $7,000 worth of just color management software and hardware to fix a problem. And I'm like, well, that's not your problem. Your problem is you can't see color on the screen accurately. You have no way to prototype or proof before you go to your giant textile machine, couple $100,000 machine, and start. You don't want to make that a proofing device. So you take the Epson 570, a 24-inch die sub with a robust digital front end. It's got a measuring device built in and a color monitor, and now you just have a whole color process control proofing system for less money. So it's a whole solution versus just a device. And I think that's the way the industry's heading, and I think that's what EPSON's trying to address. But like I said, it's new. I think it's going to be sold exclusively through Pro Graphics dealers, which you guys are. So you're not going to see one of these bundled with, an HP printer per se. This is going to be an EPSON solution. But I use it. I literally walked around Label Expo for the last 2 days. This little guy got parked, and I used this in my phone, and it worked out really well. And it gives me the ability to save stuff, send stuff. I'll say one thing. Futuristic, and part of the reason why I said this could go inside the printer. We sat through a V12, HP V12 demo in Indigo. So 12 colors, 200 feet a minute, 6 colors, 400 feet a minute. Guy puts on a pair of goggles, and the service guy's now seeing through his eyes and using his hands to fix the machine. Just an amazing architecture. But a designer could spec their spot colors in a job, hit the button, and in the HP OS, it goes to the Indigo. Inside the Indigo, it measures the colors, dials in the Pantone colors, and then sends a report back in an email back to the designer and said, yeah, your job's good to run, with no human intervention whatsoever. That's what the process control and color is important in a multiple $1 million device. They know how important it is for that designer to know those brand colors are right.
And if that continues, we're going to go back to solar.
We have solar power.
They'll have no need for any of these services.
All right.
No,
I
but
feel-
it's really cool.
Oh, Andrew, go ahead.
No, I feel like we have like 12 more questions we could ask Sal, but we try to keep these episodes tight and clean. I feel like we have to have Sal back.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And I think it's why you have me at shows, because we all know when I go to a show, it is, and you witnessed it when we were at ESCO World. No offense to the professors at the largest color theory colleges in the world, but it was tough getting drilled every morning at 7 a.m. by those PhDs and then saying, okay, you passed your quiz this morning, go talk to the customers. But yeah, I mean, it's evolving. When somebody says I'm a color expert, it makes me cringe, because the technology changes daily. And all you can do is try to grab on at piece parts that you can improve and do it. But yeah, if you want to have me back, or better yet, stop by at Print United, and we literally, and one thing I'll say about you guys is, you sponsor me to come in and have customers bring their instruments in to evaluate them. Because if the instrument's not right and you're doing the measurements and it's giving you wrong data, you're out the window anyway. So, we did that on the fly. I think we did 36 instruments while we're at ISA, and everybody was happy because they thought this was a worthless device, and now it's part of their workflow. So that's another way to answer these questions, is live with technology around us.
Yeah.
Love it. So we'll have you back because we got more questions.
Absolutely.
But we should wrap this one up. Let people get back to their day.
All right, you can get back to your day. This now is a 2-part series.
No, this is recurring guest.
Recurring guest.
But can we finish with, don't forget to register your Pantone guides. Very important. And download your Pantone Color Manager and get your libraries before it's too late.
There's more to unpack there, I think. So we're going to have to do that on the next episode.
We're going to do it.
Yeah.
Stay tuned. In the meantime, submit your questions, itsupplies.com/questions, or any of our YouTube videos. Leave a comment. Talk to your sales rep.
Talk to the color guys here in IT.
Yeah.
Great guys.
We got some of the best.
Yeah.
Sure do.
If you have color questions, we can help you untangle that mess or even just optimize something that's already going in the right direction. So we pride ourselves on that.
All right. Thanks, everyone.